Whatever the heck Nintendo is cooking up with the Switch 2, it is on more lockdown than ever before. I think this is one of the craziest things Nintendo has ever done, and they're the company that gave you the Vitality sensor. They're the company that tried to make motion control a thing, and they actually did it. They're the company that invented the Switch. They've done a lot of wild things, both good and bad, in their tenure as a video game manufacturer, but this one, it might take the cake. I can't imagine how this experience went for the people that saw this, or rather didn't see this, but we've got breaking new info from people who have touched the Switch 2. What's going on, everybody? It's Zach from SwitchForce. I'm loving today with all the awesome new reports on Switch 2. Check out my earlier video if you want to learn about the magnetic Joy-Con, the new Joy-Con, the Pro Controller compatibility, and more of what that means for the accessory scene. Because Vandal, the source of these reports, is in talks with accessory manufacturers. They're the ones who they're getting their information from, and they're the ones who dealt with Nintendo about the Switch 2. And this is where it gets crazy. Nintendo will not have this thing leak out. They will not let us see it. They will not let us learn about it. They will not even let the accessory manufacturers see it. According to Vandal, those that they talked to were allowed to touch the Switch, but not see it. We're talking about a black box scenario where they could put their hands in an opaque box and touch the Switch to get the sense of its dimensions and size, but they couldn't actually look at it, which I think is bananas, but also insanely cool. Nintendo is operating like the FBI. They've got some secret alien tech, and they are going to protect it at all costs. Now, in reality, Nintendo probably doesn't have anything all that secret, although if you want to be a conspiracy theorist, maybe one of the new features of the Switch is so cool and so crazy, they don't want it to leak out. Obviously, we know the main emphasis for Switch 2 will be better hardware. It can produce better graphics, better frame rate, better performance, better resolution. But what else is there? We talked earlier today about the magnetic Joy-Con and that being an opportunity for Nintendo to reinvent the controller that started off cute but ended up kind of subpar. They've got to get rid of drift. They've got to make the buttons bigger. They've got to make those sticks better. And hopefully the magnetic connection is a good one. But what if there's something else on the Switch that is really easily recognizable that makes a major difference? Something that if it got out there would completely spoil one of the main marketing beats for Nintendo and their next console. It's either that or they're just a little bit crazy. They don't want anybody to see the Switch, accidentally snap a picture, use an internal AI camera in their eyeball, draw a picture. Nobody can do nothing except touch it. And if you touch it, you can know the dimensions, but you can't see it. And so this has them saying that the Switch 2 is bigger than the Switch, but smaller than a Steam Deck. That's what these accessory manufacturers that got to touch the system are telling Vandal, the Spanish video game website that is bringing us all this information. And if you're worried, Vandal is very reputable. They dealt with some of these same accessory manufacturers, and that's how they learned about the Switch OLED having a new kickstand and about the Switch OLED dock having that Ethernet port. So this is very, very bizarre on Nintendo's part. And the more I talk about it, the more I think Nintendo might actually be hiding something. At first blush, I was like, okay, their security is just on lockdown. Under Furukawa launching a new system, he wants nothing to get out there. He doesn't want any sort of leaks because he wants to make sure Nintendo controls all the messaging and that they get to dictate and decide when this is announced and help protect, what they're working on. But maybe there's more to it than that. If they're letting them feel the form factor, it's not like, oh, they're not letting them see it because it's a crazy new design, right? They're letting them touch it, but not see it. There's got to be something else on this system. Maybe it's cameras. Maybe it's, I don't even know. Although you could possibly feel a camera. I don't know how far they can reach into this box or what the exact operation was like, but just imagine yourself. Close your eyes for a second and think. You are an accessory manufacturer. You made some third-party Joy-Con, and you're going to visit the secret Nintendo Switch 2 demonstration. You think you're going to see the system, and they're like, stick your hand in here, and we hope you like what you feel. Why did they need to touch it? Why couldn't they just say it's like 6 inches by this? Like, why couldn't they just give them their proportions? If they're not going to allow them to see that, and they want it to be on lockdown, what is the point in touching it but not seeing it? It's all so bizarre. You see. Now, I guess, again, it could just be that they're on supreme lockdown, but I feel like if you feel it, you could draw it. If you feel it and get your sense on it, you could kind of draw. If they're able to tell like it's bigger than a Switch and not as big as a Steam Deck, that means you could probably paint a pretty solid picture. it not being visible prevents cameras, but at the same time, I'm sure Nintendo would be very, very locked down to make sure nobody had their cell phones, nobody had cameras, there's no androids with crazy camera eyeballs. They could probably prevent any sort of leak that way. I've heard of Nintendo doing things of the sort in the past where, like, hey, they would bring the system to the review place for them to review, and it was like in a big box, so nobody actually had access to the consoles before they came out, to the games before they came out. Like, you had to be there with a Nintendo rep who was basically, like, not literally, but figuratively chained to this system so that they had to travel with it, and you couldn't, borrow it, rent it out. They didn't send it to you. These reviewers had to operate under Nintendo's very strict guidelines. But I think this is taking things to a completely different level. And so I do want to hypothesize on what they could be protecting on the Switch 2. And I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments down below of what they could not want people to see with the Switch 2. I imagine if the Joy-Con are on there, you could feel the differences in the Joy-Con, so it can't be that. The system itself, you could feel the thickness, you could feel the width, you could feel the screen. It's got to be something that would only be visible to the eyes, and maybe it's color? Is the color that big of a thing to not want to leak out? Is the bezel or no bezel? Is the nature of the screen, the nature of the buttons? Maybe it's all the color scheme. We do have that sort of like hypothesis that the new button colorings we've seen in multiple Switch games where it's like different colored buttons instead of just plain buttons is actually going to correlate with the next Nintendo Switch design. And like the Joy-Con will have colored A, B, Y, X buttons. And maybe that's what they're protecting to prevent that from leaking and that from being like, I don't know, something that ties into all these other games and maybe links people to know that, hey, they really actually did delay this thing. Maybe they're just trying to prevent and protect a leakage of that level, not something of like, oh my gosh, there's this crazy new technology on the Switch, but people just putting the puzzle pieces together and figuring out when this was supposed to come out, how that might affect, like, say their investors, right, their stock price. If they have full confirmation that Nintendo delayed this thing, does that impact the dollars and cents? It probably does, and maybe that's what Nintendo is going for, or maybe they're just going to make sure we don't find out anything. Now, what's even weirder about this is that we have a slight rumor from a Korean site saying that the Switch 2 is still going to launch in 2024. I don't believe that. I don't buy into it. I think it's probably just a fabricated rumor, but I do want to say, Nintendo being this absolutely sneaky, they could in theory be planning anything. We have sneaky Nintendo with no direct, sneaky Nintendo with no games, sneaky Nintendo with an opaque box that you reach into and have to touch the Switch like it's some sort of a Halloween experiment. What the heck is going on with Nintendo? Are they preparing to blow us away in one way or another? Blow us away with a crazier system than we expected? Blow us away with a reveal sooner than we thought? Blow us away with a launch that actually happens in this calendar year? Probably not the latter, but the first two are definitely likely and definitely plausible. And I've never heard of anything like this. I've never heard of a company not letting you see the system, but letting you touch it. I do wonder if developers are getting to see it, and maybe it's just these accessory manufacturers, since they know they have less on the line, less at stake, and they don't need the system, right? Like, you just need the dimensions. But at that point, then why touch it? You could just give them the listing of like, here's the proportions, here's a blueprint of it. You don't even need to touch it. So it's a very interesting way to go about things, and I'm super curious to find out why. Maybe it'll make sense once we see the Switch 2 and we can then go backwards and like understand, oh, that's why they didn't want them to see it. But yeah, like, why not just tell them the dimensions? Let me know your take in the comments down below, everybody. I think this is fascinating. I'm so pumped to be getting some legit Switch 2 info. So until next time, stay safe, stay healthy, stay happy, stay positive out there. Thanks so much for watching. Love you lots. SwitchForce out.